Every great marketer knows that you don't make sales through winning the argument, but through emotion.
It's no good fighting an election campaign on the facts, because actually it's all about emotion. The big mistake political parties make is that they attempt to win the argument rather than locating the emotional center of the issue or the concern and speaking directly to that.
And that is what Mark Zuckerberg came to do when he sat on a booster seat before the Congress. He came to repair his damaged reputation as a CEO of Facebook after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The motivation for Zuckerberg wasn't privacy or democracy.
We face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy.
But plummeting stock prices and threat of massive exodus of Facebook users. Zuckerberg's mission was to prove he's a strong and efficient CEO.
I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here. I started Facebook, I run it, and at the end of the day, I'm responsible for what happens here.
And to say he's got everything under his control.
Make sure that we're taking a broad enough view of our responsibility.
And that Facebook is a relevant, helpful, and irreplaceable company.
I believe deeply in what we're doing. And I know that when we address these challenges, we'll look back and view helping people connect and giving more people a voice as a positive force in the world.
This is how Mark Zuckerberg manipulated everyone through the congressional hearings. Whether you like it or not, people are emotional beings before anything else. We are not rational. Advanced marketers know that people make purchasing decisions emotionally and then use reason to justify their emotional decision. This is only how far our brains developed throughout evolution. Great retailers know that whatever it may be, they are not selling a product, but emotion. People buy things only because they perceive a value in them. If you don't need it to survive, you bought a product for emotion. That goes for business, but even more so for politics. Mark Zuckerberg came to Congress as a salesman. He was selling Facebook back to the shareholders, massively selling their stocks, politicians wishing to regulate Facebook, and users deleting their accounts. The first rule of successful selling is to make an emotional appeal. This can be done by acknowledging someone's position or agreeing with them.
And you will rightfully have some hard questions for me to answer. But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well.
By expressing a strong emotional connection,
we didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. It was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
Sorry to keep you waiting, complicated business.
By showing how much in common you share with your target,
I realize the issues we're talking about today aren't just issues for Facebook and our community. They're issues and challenges for all of us as Americans.
By stating how relevant you are,
I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here.
And how important and useful your product is.
We now serve more than 2 billion people around the world, and every day, people use our services to stay connected with the people that matter to them most.
There's nothing wrong with selling as long as you are participating in a fair competition in free market. In free market, businesses compete to make a better emotional appeal to you, and you, as a consumer, are the one who chooses the emotion you want to buy. Facebook is different. They have an advantage only few corporate behemoths enjoy, and they just happen to not compete with Facebook's monopoly. Unlike traditional salesmen, Facebook knows exactly all of your inner emotions, whether you share them publicly or not. They don't have to compete with anyone or let you choose. They know what emotion you want, probably before you even realize it. When someone knows what emotion appeals to you, they can tap into it and include whatever bloatware within the package, and you'll take it all. As Zuckerberg once famously said, people entrusted him with the complexity of their most private thoughts. Zuckerberg's had more data points on individuals than anyone else in the world, and that's why he could measure with a surgical precision what emotions of which people to target to make his message resonate. But emotion alone is not enough. People need to rationally agree to stay with you. You don't want to convince just some people. You want as many people as possible. You want all the people who believe harm is bad.
But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well.
And positive things are good.
We focused on all of the good that connecting people can do. We have to make sure that those connections are positive, but to make sure that they're used for good. Members in our community are using these tools in a way that's going to be good and healthy.
You don't talk about the specifics. You can only mention generalities, truisms, and platitudes.
Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company to take a more proactive role and a broader view of our responsibility. We'll look back and view helping people connect and giving more people a voice as a positive force in the world.
Things that everybody agrees with. Nobody disputes there shouldn't be harm and bad things on Facebook. Of course, we all want good things. I want good, you want good, Hitler wanted good. And while everybody nods to these indisputable arguments, Zuckerberg is ready to take their hands and show how they're going to take control together.
It's not enough to just give people control over their information. We need to make sure that the developers they share it with protect their information too.
This is a call to action that makes participants feel special, as if they were part of something greater. This is how you sell a pen, an idea, a subprime mortgage, or a political candidate. We are all emotional species that seek reason after emotion and want to be part of a greater action. This is how human brain works on average, and for marketers, average is good enough. Of course, this only works on average. From time to time, there are anomalies in human brain, but Zuckerberg prepared for this scenario as well. Each senator had only 5 and each representative had only 4 minutes to question Mark. This puts Zuckerberg into an advantage. Where his marketing manipulation doesn't work, he deflects those questions to kill time.
Facebook also gathers that data about where we travel, isn't that correct?
Congresswoman, everyone has control over how that works.
I'm going to get to that, but yes, you are. Would you just acknowledge that yes, Facebook is, that's the business you're in, gathering data and aggregating that data?
Congresswoman, I disagree with that characterization.
You're not, are you saying you do not gather data on where people travel based upon their internet and the ways they sign in and things like that?
Congresswoman, the primary way that Facebook works is that people choose to share data. And they share
primary
content
way,
because
but
they're
the other way that Facebook gathers data is you buy data from data brokers outside of the platform, correct?
Congresswoman, we just announced 2 weeks ago that we were going to stop interacting with data brokers, and even though that's an industry norm to make it so that the advertising can be more relevant.
But I think in the end, it's practically impossible these days to remain untracked.
Floods his answers with half-truths and truisms.
People have a control over how their information is used in ads in the product today. People would rather have us show relevant content there than not. At the first line of our terms of service say that you control and own the information and content that you put on Facebook.
States the obvious.
Can you define hate speech?
Calling for violence or...
Let's just agree on that. If somebody's calling for violence, that shouldn't be there. I'm worried about the psychological categories around speech.
So we have made a lot of mistakes in running the company. I think it's pretty much impossible, I believe, to start a company in your dorm room and then grow it to be at the scale that we're at now without making some mistakes. And
never confirms nor denies anything that could make it into the headlines of negative coverage.
Would you agree to an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out?
Senator, I think that certainly makes sense to discuss, and I think the details around this matter a lot.
Should the consumer have to opt in?
We do require permission to use the system and to put information in there and for all the uses of it.
Would you support that legislation?
Senator, in general, I think that principle is exactly right, and I think we should have a discussion around how to best codify
would you
that.
support legislation to back that general principle, that opt-in, that getting permission is the standard? Would you support legislation to make that the American standard? Europeans have passed that as a law. Facebook's going to live with that law beginning on May 25th. Would you support that as the law in the United States?
Senator, as a principle, yes, I would. I think the details matter a lot.
Right,
And
but
now that-
assuming that we work out the details, you do support opt-in as the standard, getting permission affirmatively as the standard for the United States.
Repeats this process until the time's up, because the following congressperson wouldn't follow up.
So, how do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
Mark Zuckerberg repeated this formula throughout the entire congressional hearing in the Senate and the House as well. Let's look at a couple of more examples of how Mark Zuckerberg manipulates discussion. So, Lindsey Graham asks Zuckerberg whether Facebook is a monopoly and what are its competitors.
Who's your biggest competitor?
What Senator Graham asked clearly came from a user perspective, not a developer's perspective, not an advertiser's perspective. The question was, is there a social network like Facebook that people can switch to?
Senator, we have a lot of competitors.
Who's your biggest?
I think the categories of... Do you want just one? I'm not sure I can give one, but can I give a bunch? Mm-hmm. So there are three categories that I would focus on. One are the other tech platforms, so Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. We overlap with them in different ways.
Do they provide the same service you provide?
In different ways, different parts of it, yes.
This way.
Notice how Zuckerberg took advantage of the broadest interpretation of this question to deflect to different services with which Facebook competes as an advertising platform. The angle is that users don't go to Facebook for the same reason they go to YouTube or Twitter.
If I buy a Ford and it doesn't work well and I don't like it, I can buy a Chevy. If I'm upset with Facebook, what's the equivalent product that I can go sign up for?
And Google is just a search engine, so it's absolutely ridiculous he mentioned it. But from a broader view, Facebook does compete with Google over advertising revenue from their marketing platforms. Advertisers do go to Facebook for the same reason they go to Google, to make more sales. So is Facebook a monopoly? Yes and no. The Facebook social network certainly is a monopoly. Minds.com is an alternative, but it's not a threat to Facebook. Is Facebook as an advertising network a monopoly? Far from it. They are powerful, but so is Google, Verizon, AT&T, Amazon, and Rupert Murdoch. So what Zuckerberg did here was intentional. He stated half-truths. He didn't lie, he told the truth, but not the full part of it. Senator Graham tried to push Zuckerberg into a corner, but without success.
Well, there's the second category that I was going to talk about.
I'm not talking about categories. I'm talking about, is there real competition you face? Is it an alternative to Facebook in the private sector?
Yes, Senator. The average American uses 8 different apps to communicate with their friends and stay in touch with people, ranging from texting apps to email.
Which is the same service you provide?
Well, we provide a number of different services.
Is Twitter the same as what you do?
It overlaps with a portion of what we do.
You don't think you have a monopoly?
It certainly doesn't feel like that to me.
Okay.
Zuckerberg is a marketer. He knows better how to twist the speech into his favor. Senator Wicker asked an excellent question that exposed Zuckerberg for a liar and manipulator he really is. Does Facebook collect browsing histories?
There have been reports that Facebook can track a user's internet browsing activity even after that user has logged off of the Facebook platform. Can you confirm whether or not this is true?
Senator, I want to make sure I get this accurate, so it would probably be better to have my team follow up.
So you don't know?
I know that people use cookies on the internet, and that you can probably correlate activity between sessions. We do that for a number of reasons, including security and including measuring ads to make sure that the ad experiences are the most effective, which of course people can opt out of. But I want to make sure that I'm precise in my answer, so
when you get back to me, sir.
People use cookies? Did you notice the intentional vague use of the word people? We know that people use cookies. But which people? The only people who use cookies are web developers. So I guess you could say they are people, but most people don't even know what cookies are or do. The laws of logic allow you to say people without any quantifier, and you are still right even if you speak for a tiny minority of cases. The point is that this is one of those questions answer to which could make it into the headlines of negative coverage. Zuckerberg knows exactly the answer to this question, but he can't publicly admit it. Could you imagine what a headline like "Zuckerberg admits Facebook spies on browsing histories even for people who don't have Facebook" could do to his company? So let's be precise. Zuckerberg avoids to answer this question so fiercely because around 2014, he was the one who announced Facebook's advanced tracking. It was right at the time Facebook locked down its platform precisely because they were announcing a launch of Atlas advertising network with the promise of cross-platform and cross-device targeted tracking, both online and offline, through Facebook ID. The whole truth is that not only does Facebook track your browsing history, they could even track you as you walk into a brick-and-mortar store and pay by card. Zuckerberg has to know this, because it was one of the biggest changes for Facebook, as this would radically transform the revenue stream for the company. Thanks to the fact Zuckerberg is not under oath, he can choose what information to discuss publicly to fit his narrative. Another deceptive tool Zuckerberg repeatedly used all too often was the claim that people have control over what information is used and collected.
What information Facebook's collecting, who they're sending it to, and whether they ever asked me in advance my permission to do that. Is that a fair thing for a user of Facebook to expect?
Yes, Senator. I think everyone should have control over how their information is used. And as we've talked about in some of the other questions, I think that is laid out in some of the documents, but more importantly, you want to give people control in the product itself. So the most important way that this happens across our services is that every day people come to our services to choose to share photos or send messages, and every single time they choose to share something, they have a control right there about who they want to share it with. But that level of control is extremely important.
Facebook also gathers that data about where we travel, isn't that correct?
Congresswoman, everyone has control over how that works.
I'm going to get to that, but yes, you are.
But this again is just an abuse of broad interpretations. The reason Zuckerberg deflects this non-answer every time data collection is brought up is because people are more familiar with how it works. And if that's all Zuckerberg mentions, it makes it look like that's all there really is in Facebook data gathering. But again, the whole truth is different. You do have control over which people can see your content, but Facebook has always the final say in what information is being collected. Not only does Facebook gather your voluntarily given data like posts, likes, and photos, they track you everywhere across the web. What makes the most money is data you generated outside of Facebook. When you take your phone with Facebook apps installed on it, Facebook collects everything your phone generates, including your geolocation, network, biometric, and all wireless connection data, phone numbers, contacts, information about other apps, your camera and microphone. They even follow your credit card information to track your purchases all across the web and physical stores. There is no hiding from Facebook. And even if you don't have a Facebook account, Zuckerberg still wants to create shadow profiles on you for some fake security purposes. So do not fall for the lie that you have control over your information, as Zuckerberg proudly and smugly brags. You don't. Facebook doesn't give you any opt-in or opt-out options when it collects all of your information outside of Facebook's social network. This is such an unforgivable deflection that Zuckerberg should have been taken to court over this. In another case, let's take a look at how Zuckerberg deals with the question about shadow profiles.
Facebook has detailed profiles on people who have never signed up for Facebook, yes or no?
Congressman, in general, we collect data of people who have not signed up for Facebook for security purposes to prevent the kind of scraping that you were just referring to.
So these are called shadow profiles? Is that what they've been referred to by some?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with that.
I'll refer to them as shadow profiles for today's hearing. On average, how many data points does Facebook have on each Facebook user?
I do not know off the top of my head.
So the average for non-Facebook platforms is 1,500. It's been reported that Facebook has as many as 29,000 data points for an average Facebook user. Do you know how many points of data that Facebook has on the average non-Facebook user?
Congressman, I do not off the top of my head, but I can have our team get back to you afterwards.
I appreciate that.
Once again, in general, I don't know, I'm not familiar. People have control, people can choose, everybody consents. But luckily the congressman presses Zuckerberg to give a clear response, and this is what we get.
It's been admitted by Facebook that you do collect data points on non-average users. So my question is, can someone who does not have a Facebook account opt out of Facebook's involuntary data collection?
Congressman, anyone can turn off and opt out of any data collection for ads, whether they use our services or not. But in order to prevent people from scraping public information, which again, the search feature that you brought up only showed public information, people's names and profiles and things that they'd made public, but nonetheless, we don't want people aggregating even public information.
So now people who don't even know they are being tracked have to opt out of something they don't even use? This is like blaming rape victims for asking for it, or the she said no but really meant yes mentality. So your default position is to invade everybody's privacy until they specifically tell you not to do that.
You've said everyone controls their data, but you're collecting data on people that are not even Facebook users, that have never signed a consent, a privacy agreement, and you're collecting their data. And it may surprise you that on Facebook's page, when you go to I don't have a Facebook account and would like to request all my personal data stored by Facebook, it takes you to a form that says go to your Facebook page, and then on your account settings you can download your data. So you're directing people that don't have access, don't even have a Facebook page, to have to sign up for a page to release their data. We've got to fix that.
This kind of twisted authoritarian attitude belongs to third world dictatorships and not democracy. You have to really pause and think about how sick and dangerous this is. This is the kind of thinking that dumps millions of dollars every year into lobbying and bribing politicians to make new laws that govern us. It's this spineless view of the world that sets a precedence and builds a new world order. These are going to be the pillars of modern society. For our final example, just look at how comfortable Zuckerberg is with dodging tough questions with "I don't know."
How many Facebook like buttons are there on non-Facebook web pages?
Congresswoman, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but we'll get back to you.
Is the number over 100 million?
I believe we've served the like button on pages more than that, but I don't know the number of pages that have the like button on actively.
How many Facebook share buttons are there on non-Facebook web pages?
I don't know the answer to that exactly off the top of my head either, but that's something that we can follow up with you on.
And do we think that's over 100 million? Likely. How many chunks of Facebook pixel code are there on non-Facebook web pages?
Congresswoman, you're asking some specific stats that I don't know off the top of my head, but we can follow up with you and get back to you on all of these.
Can you commit to get back to the committee? The European Union is asking for 72 hours on transparency. Do you think we could get that back in committee in 72 hours?
Congresswoman, I will talk to my team and we will follow up.
To be fair, these questions are not that difficult to dodge when you ask someone about 9-figure numbers, but the context behind those answers is way more telling. Zuckerberg feels untouchable. This is nearly the end of the congressional hearings, out of which he came out as a winner. He is powerful. He has billions at his disposal to buy off every single person in that room. And he most likely has more dirt on everyone than anyone else in the world, with the exception of 2 or 3 other people. At this point, nothing can hurt him. He's invincible. His company is beyond too big to fail. Facebook generates most of its revenue from outside of the US, so even with massive exodus of Facebook users in the US and Europe, he'd still continue to dominate overpopulated Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Revenue which he'll always be able to use to buy influence through other means. In the mind of a robot, if its utility function is to increase the personal relevancy of advertisements, then whatever means to achieve that is also going to include bulk collection of private data with or without user consent. For Mark Zuckerberg, everything is a utility function, which probably contributes to his overall appearance that makes him a victim of ridicule over his awkward behavior. Maybe he wouldn't have been so awkward if he'd escaped his multi-billion-dollar bubble that makes him think he can do whatever he wants with people who he once referred to as dumb fucks. So if you didn't spend 10 hours watching the hearings, do you think you couldn't be manipulated? Most people never listen to these hearings. They instead turn to the media headlines, articles, and videos. Headlines written by people whom Mark Zuckerberg intended to manipulate first. For Zuckerberg, everybody in the room is a proxy to reach a wider audience. Politicians will talk to their constituents, journalists will talk to their readers. Maybe you really are an anomaly, and Zuckerberg's manipulation didn't work on you. That is true only if you deleted your Facebook. If you kept it, what's your justification? Is that it helps you stay connected? Because that's what Zuckerberg would have you believe. But it's not true. If anything, Facebook's algorithms make you live inside a bubble filled with content you are most likely to spend your time and money on. They don't give you a free service for nothing. They need to make profit, and this is how they do it. Facebook proactively filters and manipulates what you get to see and know, to play around with your emotions and perception of reality, to make you think the way they want you to think. And furthermore, there are dozens of ways to stay connected much better than on Facebook. So if you haven't deleted your Facebook account, it's a purely emotional decision that a successful marketing campaign persuaded you to make and rationally justify afterwards. Facebook is not the best. It's not irreplaceable, and you can live without it. Whatever value you think it has is just your perception that doesn't exist outside of your brain.